All right. Awesome. Okay. So welcome to our first webinar on the series of Indigenous-led climate justice. And we're very, very happy that you're here. And as we usually like to do is we sort of hold this space in a mindfulness energy. Adriana and I practice in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh. And so that's kind of how we came to be offering these webinars, because we're really wanting to highlight the work of so many people that isn't normally seen in these communities, mindfulness communities, that sometimes we miss these things that are very, very important. And Thich Nhat Hanh has often spoken about understanding as the foundation of love, and also understanding as the foundation of wise action. And so we're here to understand and learn together, as Adriana has said. So I'm going to read something from Thich Nhat Hanh, a short quote, and then we'll have 3 sounds of the bell just to settle ourselves and fully arrive here together. So these are the 5 awarenesses from the Chanting book, Chanting from the Heart. We are aware that all generations of our ancestors and all future generations are present in us. We are aware of the expectations that our ancestors, our children, and their children have of us. We are aware that our joy, peace, freedom, and harmony are the joy, peace, freedom, and harmony of our ancestors, our children, and their children. We are aware that understanding is the very foundation of love. We are aware that blaming and arguing can never help us and only create a wider gap between us. That only understanding, trust, and love can help us change and grow. Turn it over to Adriana.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, everyone, again. Tonight, we are absolutely excited to have, we are starting the series on environmental justice, and we have the honor to have Brenda Perez Amador as our curator. Brenda is a great woman. You were gonna learn more about her, and she's my paisana from Mexico, so I'm so glad to have her here. I'm gonna read a little bit of her bio. It's just part of what she is. She's far more than that, and she's always great. So just please hear something, and she will tell you more about her and about this series that we are starting tonight with you. So Brenda is a local DC award-winning community activist who is passionate about fighting for the liberation of Mother Earth and oppressed people of color. Originally from Nezahualcóyotl, Mexico, in Mexico City, she has been living in DC since 2006. Though she began to notice disparities early on as she navigated the public education system, her formal introduction to organizing spaces happened under the training of Movement Matters, where she met other students who were organizing to address issues that were affecting them. In high school, she began to organize around language justice and the broader immigrant rights movement. She continues to organize and is currently working on the New Deal for Youth and the Center for Law and Social Policy to propose policy changes that provide more economic opportunities for youth. She has a master's degree in water resources management from the University of the District of Columbia, and is a program analyst for DOEE's Office of Urban Agriculture, where her efforts focus on finding new ways to make public funds more accessible to urban farmers, to reduce food insecurity, and create more opportunities to grow food locally. Recognizing that climate change is a time-sensitive issue, she strives to be inclusive and open up spaces for action in communities that have been impacted disproportionately. So it's a great honor to bring Brenda with you. And Brenda, the space is yours. Thank you so much for all this.
Thank you guys, and thank you for just for creating space for me to be able to put this series together, and to be able to like tell you guys about environmental justice from my perspective, from like the perspective of the movement and the amazing people that I've met. So thank you for sharing my bio. I currently work for DC government and their Department of Urban Agriculture. And I'm basically trying to find ways in which we can increase or decrease food insecurity in the district by encouraging people to grow food locally. And it can happen in the city. We just have to be incredibly creative about it. And so, I also had the pleasure to be able to do a series around immigration. I think about last year with Adriana's daughter, with Renata. And I really love this space because, sometimes you're given a platform, with a lot of restrictions and like a very specific messaging. But I love this platform and continue to invite others because it really allows them to speak, from a place of authenticity and, like tell you like how their story really is and how the movement really is. So this is why I decided, I agreed to curate this series on environmental justice. And, from what I've learned, around environmental justice is really rooted in acknowledging the disproportionate environmental burden that marginalized communities bear, including the harmful effects of climate change, urban planning, deforestation, and the desecration of sacred lands. And one of those marginalized communities have been indigenous communities. And despite colonization, capitalism, and racial injustice, indigenous people continue to be at the front lines of very important environmental movements of today. And they are also the original stewards of this land. And so one of the things that I've learned is through my work in organizing is that if you really want to find the root issue and find solutions that work, you have to go to the experts. And the experts are the communities that are impacted the most, are impacted by the issues. They are the only ones that can tell you exactly what is it that they need in order to be able to succeed, in order to be able to find a solution that works, not just for them, but for everybody else. And so, I wanted to focus this series on Indigenous-led movements, because investing in Indigenous self-determination and shifting decision-making power to center Indigenous systems of knowledge those are vital to restoring our natural and built environments. And in addition to all of this, environmental justice is a very intersectional issue. I work at the Department of Energy in DC, and one of the things that I hear the most is that we need to stop eating red meat, in order to save the environment, But one of the things, I started to really think about that, and well, why meat? Oh, because because of the gases that cows produce, that's bad for the environment, and I'm like, where do you get your meat, or where do you get your vegetables if you're vegetarian? Oh, well, I get them at Safeway or Giant because I have so many of those big supermarkets nearby. And I'm like, do you know where your food comes from? Like in DC specifically, like the produce that comes to our food stores comes from California and Texas. And, like my next question is always like, do you know who's cultivating all of your food? and if you pay attention to the news, it's mostly immigrant and mostly undocumented people who work under like severe climate conditions, work very underpaid, and live in these like very like almost like shanty towns and these mega farms. So then when we start to deconstruct all of that, veganism, vegetarianism, and any other issue, we start to find other issues. That's why I always say, environmental justice is an intersectional area, and we need to be able to understand all of the aspects of it and not just focus on the single one that we learn from the mainstream media. So, yeah, so environmental justice is that also. It deals with social, racial, and economic inequities. And so therefore, that means that the solutions must also be intersectional and center the most vulnerable communities. So the speakers that I chose for you for this series are people that have really like that have been at the front lines of the movement and continue to explore what does it look like to find those intersectional solutions that we need. And so I hope that you're able to listen to them and learn from them. And please do ask them a lot of questions because these are folks that are full of knowledge, including our first presenter, Tomas Lopez today. And I'm so excited about Tomas because Tomas has taught me so much about the environmental movement, including what it looks like to do the movement with joy and celebrate your people and our accomplishments. And I'm going to read Tomas's bio, and then I'll let you, Tomas, continue to introduce yourself and begin with your talk. And so Tomas Lopez Jr. was born and raised in Northern Cheyenne Territory, or also known as Denver, Colorado. And they are a grandchild of Chief Leonard Crow Dog Sr. and the child of waterwoman Sharon Dominguez and Sundance Chief Tomas Lopez Sr. They spent years working with the International Indigenous Youth Council, IIYC, working to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline and to establish a presence in other Indigenous communities. And Tomas continues to work with the IIYC and Future Coalition as an adult mentor. And after exploring many corners of movement spaces, Tomas now chooses to inspire cultural change through comedy, fashion, and media. And yes, so Tomas, I will kick it to you, and folks, please, listen with an open heart and write down your questions in the chat.
Upila, thank you so much, Brenda. Antatuashde yat ebene tlaso kamali umeteo. My name is Tomas Lopez Jr. Like Brenda said, I am one of many grandchildren of Chief of Chiefs Leonard Crow Dog Sr. and this proud child of waterwoman Sharon Dominguez and Sundance Chief Tomas Lopez Sr. I am Meshika Otomi and Shichangu Lakota. I was born in Denver, Colorado, Cheyenne, Arapaho Ute territory. And I very much so got a very interesting experience growing up. And that has definitely led to who I am today. But before I jump into like my story and what I want to share, I just want to share a song with everybody. Because around this time, about 5, 6, I can't even remember now, 6 years ago, young people from the Standing Rock Dakota Nation ran to Washington, D.C. and started what we now know as a fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline. And this is one of the songs that they created while we were on the front lines. And I just want to share it with you. And it translates to, Unshimaka is calling you, and our water is sacred life. But the Dakota Access Pipeline, or the pipelines, they're bad for the people, they're bad for the earth, but the people will come together. But the people will stand strong together is what it translates to. Unshimaka yohaniabo Mini wichoni makaela ayo DAPL la sijayela oya deble hichiabo oya deble hichiabo oya deble hichiabo hey oh unshema kayo aniabo mini wichoni makayela hey oh DAPL la sijayela Oya deble hijiabo Oya deble hijiabo Oya deble hijiabo Hey oh Aho mitaku yo yasin. So yeah, I'm really honored to be here today. I'm very honored to be able to speak to you and humbled that I can get the opportunity and privilege to be in spaces like this, that I have gotten the privilege and opportunity to be in many spaces like this, to tell my story, to share the place that I come from. And in order to, when we come into these spaces, often you'll hear us introduce who our grandparents and who our parents are, because who I am and the knowledge that I present today is a culmination of generations of people. It isn't just knowledge that I pulled out somewhere or I read in a book. It's something that was taught to me by an elder, by my parents, by my grandparents. And so like most of our traditions, they are oral traditions. And we have proven that our oral traditions are just as valuable and just as strong as any scientific method in any Western world. So my story again starts going to just different protests and different camps when I was young. I can remember the first social action that I had ever gone to was actually a run. It's the Peace and Dignity run, where they unite the Eagle and Condor Nation by running from the tip of Alaska to La Tierra de Fuego. And I remember being taught by all of those Chicano movement, those Aimster people, that what it meant to be indigenous, what it meant to be native, what it meant to be Chicano, what it meant to identify as a native person of this hemisphere. And those fights and those things were taught to me at a super early age. And I remember running through Colorado, and they were headed actually up to Wyoming. And I remember sitting there and being told, like, watch what's everything that's happening, because one day you're going to be called upon. And it's something that you are going to have to answer. You'll feel it. You'll understand it. Fast forward, I guess, like 10 years into the future. I guess maybe more. I'm really bad at math, so years are many moons in the future. I was graduating from college, and I was about to literally just like start hitting the job search really hard. I had just gone through 4 years of college and was promised this amazing job with this amazing degree that I had, and I quickly realized that was not the case. So there I am, and I'm sitting in American Apparel, just selling clothes and things to people that they totally don't need. And all of a sudden, all of my cousins and all of my family start telling me about these young people who are running from North Dakota to Washington, D.C. And people were asking, they're asking people to come to Standing Rock and to make a stand against this pipeline. And I remember just being like, whoa, that's really crazy, how old are, when you say young people, do you mean and they were like, no, these people are 14, 15, 16 years old, making this stand and calling for people to go. And so people from all nations began to answer that call. And my father being, a chief and a warrior, I felt that call that I was told about years before. I felt that pull towards something. And I told my dad, I feel like as a chief, you should be represented there, that we should be contributing to this community and to this fight. So I packed up all my stuff. I actually quit my job, and I, put a bunch of supplies in the back of our car. We made the journey to Standing Rock, and what was supposed to be like a weekend for me ended up becoming like a 3-month chapter and pivotal moment of my life. And what I learned there and what I experienced would completely change my life and everything that I understood about who I was and my placement in the world. While I was there, I quickly attracted a bunch of young people who were a part of a group called the International Indigenous Youth Council. And my idea of what it meant to be a young person, what it meant to be a youth, completely changed. I had been operating under this idea that the minute you turn 18, you're an adult, and that's that. You're on your own, you make your decisions, and you just live your life. And all of a sudden, here I was, a 22-year-old person, completely like stripping myself of like adulthood and understanding like, wait, I actually very much so am a kid still. And there's so much that I have to learn. There's so much that I have to build, but yet there's so much that I have to offer and so much that I have to teach. And this space allowed me to build those skills, but share those skills at the same time. It was one of the most beautiful experiences I'd ever been through in my life. Realizing that we as Indigenous people are so different, yet so similar, was so important for me. And that that was just something that I had never really lived. Growing up in the city, often you find yourself being the only Native person in the room. You often find yourself hanging out with a lot of Black and Latin identifying people, which we can get into that whole issue another time, because there's really no one else around you that's like you. So you gravitate to what is closest to your culture. And oftentimes that is Black culture, that is Mexican culture, that is Puerto Rican culture. And for the first time in my life, I was in a room surrounded by people who looked, sounded, and had come from places almost exactly like mine. And that power, that unity, that sense of community, that sense of self was so powerful for me. So I went through everything that you see in Standing Rock. I was attacked, I was maced, I experienced all the beauty and all the pain that Standing Rock had to offer. Coming out of Standing Rock, I'm gonna come full circle to this in a sec. When I went, the message that was being told to me was that I needed to fight at all costs, that I needed to fight to win, and that the win was stopping the pipeline. And I was told to simply use the knowledge that I had. And let me tell you, where I come from, a fight, yeah, that's not anything pretty, that's not anything peaceful. It's not anything that's like, oh, like we're gonna kumbaya. No, a fight is a fight, it's survival. And so when they told me to do that, I began to use that mentality of I'm in battle. I am a warrior. I'm in war. I have to fight. And they failed to mention the consequences that come with choosing to fight like that. So when we left Standing Rock, what happened? We all realized that we had been given a mountain of trauma on top of the mountain of trauma that we had gone to Standing Rock with. Growing up being Native is one of the most traumatizing things that I know. We are the bottom of society in every single culture in this hemisphere. There is nothing below a Native person in many countries, Canada, America, Mexico, Panama, Colombia, every single place, they look at the native people as if they're either completely gone or they are dirt. So growing up in that, you already are coming to Standing Rock with all of that trauma, and then you're given all of this trauma, and then you don't stop the pipeline. And all of a sudden, everyone goes home, and we're now expected to deal with this loss while also acclimating ourselves back into this society and going through that and dealing and holding my siblings, my younger siblings, in the best way that I could was one of the most challenging things that I did. In the summer, early fall of 2017, we were given the RFK Human Rights Award. And in that moment, I met a lot of the March for Our Lives youth. When I met these young people, I looked in their eyes, and the same look that I saw in my eyes and in the mirror when I would look and in the faces of my young people was the same look that I was seeing on the faces of these young people. The feeling like, holy shit, I already got my ass kicked. All right. And now it's my responsibility to clean it all up. That fight of who do I choose, my people or myself, is a really hard thing to swallow and hard thing to choose when you're in your 20s. Let's just be honest. It's a really hard thing to choose, to ask these young people to stop what they're doing, to sacrifice their youth, to fight for a problem that truthfully is nobody's fault, except for these corporations. There's no one person we can blame for this. There's no one person we can go and talk to. This is a systemic issue. This is something that is rooted in hundreds of years of violence and trigger warning, rape of the earth, of our women, of our two-spirit people, of our children. And to expect these people to just solve it, to be the change, the revolucionario that's going to save it, it was too much for me. And I quickly realized while I was there, I need help. I need help. And if I don't help myself, and if I don't change my idea of what a fight is and what I've conditioned to believe a fight looks like, if I don't change that for myself, I am going to set this next generation of young people up to do exactly what I just did. And it's not fair. And I am not someone that operates in a world of madness. When you do something and it doesn't work and you try it one more time and it still doesn't work, maybe you don't do it a third time. So I had to really completely rewire myself, go to anger management, explain to myself and figure out, why am I feeling what I'm feeling? Why is it that I'm angry? Why is it that I'm expressing myself in this way that ultimately is like verbally punching people who don't even deserve it? I had to figure that out. And when I did that, I quickly realized that I no longer want to take this closed fist approach. I understand what this symbol means, and I agree with this symbol. But maybe when I'm walking around with my fists closed, I don't actually allow them to be open to accept all of the beauty and blessings that life truly has to offer me. And if I don't learn how to accept that beauty, and I don't learn how to be the beautiful flower that I am and just simply enjoy the passing of time, then I am going to do this next generation a world of hurt. I am simply going to wrap up all of my issues into a nice little package and pass it off to them as training. And that renaissance, that change in thinking, that shifting in consciousness in myself was more profound and more powerful than any action, any speech, any rally, any march I'd ever done in my life, when I shifted my own self and my own belief and my own idea of what the world was and what my journey was and who I am and my place in the world, the young people behind me began to just follow in those footsteps. They began to realize maybe we should actually be loving each other when we come to these front lines. Maybe we should be singing and laughing, and maybe we should be praying, and maybe we should, sometimes people need to cry, and we make that space for people to cry. And that's a lot coming from me. I like to consider myself, unfortunately, a pretty emotionally unavailable person, but I found that in these times, even a person like me has to be able to allow for the spirit to move through. And my grandpa used to say that when we were in ceremony, when you're dancing, when you're moving, when you're praying, don't close your eyes, because you might miss that spirit. And that spirit only moves through once, and it has to have this space, and it just goes through. And if you're busy, you're not paying attention, and you're not focused, then you miss that. And I realized for all these years, I was so worried about fighting, so worried about winning, so worried about the idea of this perfect action, that I was missed the spirit. And there was so much beauty that I was experiencing, but I couldn't truly live through. And so now I have completely decided that the best and most powerful thing that I can do for the world is simply be myself, is simply reclaim my voice, my platform, and really understand that, like, all of the things that I feel, the decisions that I make, the way I live my life is because of these traumas and these things that I've been through. And from that, the Land Back Baddie was birthed. Prior to this year, I really did believe, like I said, there was a certain way that I had to be in order to be accepted in this activism space. Truth be told, that was a very, very filtered and very, very watered down version of who I am. I unfortunately am not someone that was raised in a politically correct space. I am not somebody that was told that, keep what you feel inside. Like, I was very much so taught that the world is a tough place, and someone like you, if you know me, I'm 5'2", I'm very feminine. I was born male, and so most of my life I've been put into the male, like with the rest of the males, and I never fit in that. And my parents just kind of told me, you don't fit the societal mold, and you're gonna have to fight a little bit harder than everyone else to be seen and to be heard, but you can do it. And you should do it, and don't be afraid to do it, and don't be afraid to take that stand. And so when I was moving through these spaces, I had to water myself down. Oh man, I was like Santo Tomas. Let me tell you, like, I was really just like prayerful for everybody. And when I dropped that facade, I realized that all of my imperfections, all of those things that like make me not politically correct, were actually very normal things that most Black and brown people were experiencing, and were very confused when we came into these spaces that all of a sudden what we knew to just be culture is now violent communication. You know what I mean? Like now all of a sudden, like, I, as a brown person, am in this space, and these young suburban and white kids are called, I'm now like, I'm mean. And it's like, all right, I can't abide by that. I can't follow that. I am who I am. I'm working on that. And there are so many other young Black and brown people that feel exactly the way that I do, that we can't actually be ourselves when we come into these spaces, that we have to 10 and 2 it up, so that we make certain people feel comfortable. And the truth is that I'm not here to make anyone feel comfortable. My purpose in life truly is not to make sure that you on the other side or receiving end are completely comfortable. That is a self-help thing. That are things that we have to learn how to manage on our own. Am I accountable for my words? Am I accountable for the things that I do? Yes, but I have to be authentically myself. And when I shed that and I just became the most authentic spirit and self that I possibly could while I'm living through this human experience, is what really led me into this whole land back world and what it means to be a land back baddie. I've always been a baddie. I've always loved fashion. I love makeup. I love, being with people. I love dancing. I love being good at things. I love being good at things. I try to steer away from the things that I'm not as good at. But when I really got into the land back movement, I understood, like, not only were people physically fighting for their traditional homelands and the rights to caretake their land, but that my land, the land, the only thing that I truly own in this world, I almost had no control over. I had no autonomy over who I was. It was as if I had to operate within the bounds of what this society told me I needed to be. And my idea of the land back campaign, the land back movement, is reclaiming my body, reclaiming my voice, reclaiming my story, my autonomy, my right to decide where and what I do with this land. And that has not only helped so many young people, but so many queer people, so many trans people, so many two-spirit people. It has helped them come out of this shell. The idea that there are no queer natives was a real belief prior to about 10 years ago for a lot of folks in mainstream pop culture. This idea that we as Native people, as Native men, women, and non-binary people can actually be valued members of the LGBTQ plus community is not something that I grew up being told. And so everything that I do now is all about not only reclaiming the land and what we know to be as Earth, but also reestablishing ourselves, our human selves, as a reciprocal part of Unshimaka. She is not separate of us. We are Earth. There's no mistake that when you dig into the ground, she is black and she is brown. She's the same color as we are. And so I use those things and I use those connections to show black and brown and indigenous queer people and trans people that it's time for us to awaken, and it's time for us to reclaim the respect, the love, and the spaces that we have always been in, but have never truly been allowed to stand out in. And so that's where a lot of the land back baddie and my queer liberation comes from. And yeah, so where am I now? I'm going to just kind of do a wrap up and then we can go to some Q&A. Like Brenda said, I am still an adult mentor for the International Indigenous Youth Council. I've stepped back from national organizing, and I really focus on my young people here in Denver, Colorado, to make sure that they are getting the time and energy and resources that they need. We primarily fight against the Suncor refinery that's here. Actually, I just moved. I literally live 20 blocks from the Suncor refinery now. I'm back in the fight, which is really interesting. And I'm also now working on a new piece called the Takala photo series, where we are actually going to different communities and helping young people tell their story of their community through their experiences living in these communities. We are basically, what we're doing is what folks did for Greta, but for young Black and Brown organizers who truthfully are not being given the same time and attention to actually get their frontline fight seen and into the places where mass amounts of people are reading about them and giving them support. So that's basically what we're doing, and it's all completely BIPOC led. And it has been one of the most beautiful experiences that I've ever embarked on in my life, and has really ultimately shown me that one of the biggest causes and one of the biggest and most overlooked issues of the climate strikes, of the climate crisis, excuse me, is the fact that migration is a human necessity. Migration is something that humans, all animals must do. There was no such thing as borders. In order for people to, and farms and communities to thrive, we had to share with each other, and not just knowledge, not just language, not just foods, not just medicines, but people. You can't just continue to populate with the same peoples, guys. We would all be cousins. Like, you had to have those migrations of people, those tribes coming together, those rediscovering new things in order for our ways of life to truly continue sustaining in the ways that they have. And what we see now are borders that have completely disrupted these ancient and traditional migration patterns that we as Indigenous people have traveled for centuries before this Western infant society was ever even thought of. And when you stop those migration patterns, you disrupt the entire flow of this body. This turtle island is a body, and we've disrupted her blood flow. We are her blood. We are her. And when we disrupt those sacred migration patterns back and forward the way we've been doing for centuries, we disrupt the climate, what we know as the climate. And the problem that we have now is that we've made it legal for certain people to migrate and illegal for others to do that. And that is one of the most critical points of the climate crisis that is talked about the least. This idea that I'm Chicano, but not native. This idea that they're Canadian, but not native. This idea that they're Mexican, but not native, is something that we have to strip ourselves of. And it's the same thing of this: we are human and not of the earth. We have separated ourselves from truth. We've severed our connection to the earth. We've gone against what we as humans were put here to do. And with that, I thank you so much for listening to me today and allowing me to just share some of my experiences and what I have gone through. And yeah, I'm sure I missed a whole bunch, but I think I got out what needed to get out. So I'll pass it over to Brenda and we can start the Q&A.
Oh my goodness, Tomas, thank you so much. Every time I sit down with Tomas, I just learned so much. And today was really one of those days. So again, and really thank you for mentioning migration. There is a big conversation that is starting now, even within the immigration movement, around why people need to migrate because of climate change. And so thank you for highlighting that. And also, for talking about trauma, especially with Indigenous youth, the project that I'm working with right now with the New Deal for Youth, which is an economic package that youth want to introduce. One of the environmental demands, or one of the demands for the environmental justice issue, is to give young Indigenous people access to healing centered, culturally responsive physical, mental health care that responds to that, the trauma, the impacts of climate change, and ensuring that, they don't exacerbate, that trauma. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that. and also about oral history, like a lot of people, like really focus on written history, but, as I learned from, especially, Dr. Tayak, who's right here, who is a history professor at George Mason, that it's really important to focus on oral history, because that's the way that we've been preserving our traditions and our knowledge. So, I'm just, highlighting some of the things that I learned, but I really appreciate you. And we have one question in the chat right now, and it comes from Laura. And I guess I'll read it since I don't see Laura on the screen, but she's a homeowner in Illinois. And she's asking, how can I dedicate at least an awareness of my land to the indigenous people it was stolen from? And Laura, if you want to add more to it, more context to that, that'll be great. And if not, we can pass it to Tomas.
Yeah, I guess I'm just really wondering how, in a limited context, I can at least make peace with the piece of land that I'm on, to, give it that awareness that it needs to heal, that it's been stolen and repurposed many times until it was sort of repackaged for me. But now I need to try to be kind to it, which I feel needs to recognize its indigenous roots. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing about the land back movement is that it really means something different to everyone. It's really difficult for me to say what folks and again, I don't know I can't tell you exactly what tribe is in Illinois. I'd have to look, but your best bet would really be to just engage in the indigenous communities that are there, uplift what they're doing. Any ways that you can help them and be of service to them is really what communities need, is just true allies. If you want a physical thing you could do, I mean, always researching the indigenous plants that are, native to that area, and making sure that if you have a garden or you plant flowers, that the flowers that you are in fact planting are stuff that are from that land and are things that are really going to help, because a lot of our homes, they, in order to make them look beautiful, they brought a lot of invasive plants and species here. And, people think that the word invasive usually automatically means bad. It doesn't. There are some invasive plants that are not terrible for the environment, obviously, but there are, especially when you go out west, to California. I mean, most of the plants that are in LA are just the worst possible plant you could put in a desert. But I think that really understanding what are the herbs, what are the types of grasses that grow here naturally that I can plant in my home that are going to restore the earth back to what it was. Because when you start to bring all these new things in, you disrupt the soil, you disrupt, thousands of years of making it the perfect climate for these plants to grow. And so when you start replenishing it and bringing it back to what it was or what it's supposed to be, you help, you help the earth and the climate just overall in general.
Thank you, Tomas. And also, since Gaby hasn't turned off her camera yet, I'm gonna, quickly just make a little bit of space for you. Gaby Tayak is probably one of my favorite people. She's a Piscataway woman, and she is also my suegra, my mother-in-law. And, she has really taught me about the importance of oral history. And she's now a professor at George Mason University. And I have a couple of friends over there that take classes with her. And, you know, they just like come out so like very, very like open and very, you know, like, yeah, just like really glad that they are able to see themselves and their peoples and, you know, and the lessons that Gaby teaches them. So Gaby, if you want us to share a few words, like that will be really incredible.
Oh, well, hi, Brenda, and everybody. Thank you so much, Tomas. You know, I actually raised my hand because first I wanted to just send whatever how do I say this? Just like a bright, like love beam at you because of what you have just so transformatively presented to us in this space from a place that is so honest and real. And also thank you to Annie and to Adriana for bringing us together. So I did, you know, I was just with a longtime youth circle leader, a man named Juan Pacheco. I just spent the afternoon with him looking through his materials as he was trying to bring together these histories. And so, Tomas, I did want to ask you, you know, as you came to a revelation, you know, you came to a point like a turning point where you had this realization of what needed to be done from like it's like this inside out, right? Like the inside out. And like after having watched and participated in movements for so long, and you can build all of these infrastructures, even when you get like what we call the win, you know, what you might actually call a win of, you know, the policy, the change, the difference, it can collapse. You know, we've seen that collapse. It's like a house, you know, like house of cards. It collapses because what we don't have is the strength from the inside. And you know, I'm at this age, I've seen a couple of cycles of that. So I'm wondering, you know, just from your perspective, and I'd love to hear also, you know, Brenda, if you have comments on this, is what was it that had you come to that level of transformative movement? Like, and what do you see when you work with other younger people, when you talk with, you know, and organize with the young people? What is it that gets them to that point to say, yes, this is like, it's that core versus the external? I'm just wondering if you could reflect on that a bit. That would be so helpful. Thank you. And you're muted.
Yeah. Oh God, like what didn't happen? I'm gonna be honest, like the pandemic was like one really big thing, but also in like 2019, a lot of, I felt like I was kind of like burning bridges with people, like in like not a good way. I guess there's a good way to burn a bridge. In not a good way. I was like kind of burning bridges with people, and it was very much so a me thing. And kind of just had found myself what was my like rock bottom. And as Native people, you know, we're taught when you're down, you know, you pray, you use your traditional ways. And my grandpa was really sick at that time, and my dad was like, let's go up there and let's talk to him and see what he can do. Oh my God, my I think I got it. My laptop's getting low. So I went up there, and I had also been invited to Panama at the time. So I'm gonna go grab my charger. I'm sorry, I don't want it to die. I thought I could make it, but I'm scared.
Hey, I'm going to pop in. It's Annie, and just say, for those of us in the mindfulness community, I'm finding this to be one of the better Dharma talks that I've heard. It is really touching the heart of our practice, at least in our tradition, this kind of transformation, and the land, like the knowing this is our land, is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So Thank you, Tomas. But all right, I'll bow out again.
Sorry, I just didn't want my laptop to die. But so I had also at that time been invited to Panama. So I drove up to Rapid City. And I asked my I told my grandpa like what was going on. And I told him that I was going to Panama. Not only was I going to Panama, but I was going to meet with one of the Kuna leaders of the Panama people, of like the Kuna people. So I asked him like what we should do. And he was like, oh, perfect. You need to go down there. And like, basically he was like, you need to go make a treaty with those people. And you need to make allies with them so that if we ever need them or they ever need you, we can answer their call. So he says, but you go down there and you take your chanupa with you. And he was like, and it's going to be a really hard trip. It's going to be one of the hardest things you've probably ever done. But like, I need you to do that. And on your way home, you're going to see a white-tailed deer. And I want you to pull over and I want you to give tobacco and I want you to take that deer's tail. And so I was like, okay. So sure enough, we saw the white-tailed deer on the side of the road. So I took the white-tailed deer, I froze it, and then we dipped it in formaldehyde, and then I went on my trip. On this trip, we hiked, biked, and kayaked from one end of the peninsula to the other. And so it was like a very physically enduring trip. And while I was there, that was ultimately like, physically it challenged me, mentally it challenged me, spiritually it challenged me. And at the end of it, I just realized that, I don't know, I just felt like I had been given a new set of skills to fight this, and that I did have a lot going on, and actually I shouldn't give myself that much credit. By that point, I had started going to therapy. I had started to do some of the work as well. So like embarking on this trip was kind of like putting all of the stuff that I was learning actually into practice, and like testing it and realizing like, okay, this actually works. And like when I put myself in this space of love and generosity, and I walk with an open heart, and I simply come from a place, as like you said, of authenticity, you can't do much wrong, like I just really realized that. And I think that was the lesson that I learned, and that was that turning point of like, holy shit, I don't actually have to fight, I don't actually have to fight anyone, anything, and I can just be and exist and live, and that's enough. And I think that was like my turning point for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tomas. That's one of the things that, that when we were sitting down in our dining table, that really like touched me, and it made me reflect on the movements that I'm part of, like how do we do this differently, and like really centering within the movement, the joy of our people. And, like that has sparked, like so many other conversations, and, like almost like this like new energy too, to keep on going. Because after the pandemic, for the immigration movement, like it lost a lot of steam and it was really hard. But really focusing on, like our efforts, our joy, celebrating our cultures, like that ramped a new kind of energy. And like you saying, not just this, but like receiving, and like what are we learning? So I really thank you for that. And yeah, I guess with thinking about the pandemic, one of the things that I was curious about is how has the after the pandemic, how has the environmental movement changed from your perspective, from where you've seen? Because I know that that is still something that, you know, is happening, you know, so I would love to learn a little bit more about that.
Oh God, everyone's miserable. I'm kind of kidding. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. The pandemic really, I don't even know if like this is like a bad thing, but the pandemic personally made me realize how toxic movement spaces are. Ooh, I said what I said. It has really just shown me that like we infiltrators, we don't need infiltrators. We'll eat ourselves from the inside out without all that. Like that's really what I've realized about our movement spaces, and I've kind of just come to the understanding that like there's two actually types of spaces that are movement spaces. One of them calls itself a movement space and is very much so tailored by like the nonprofit industrial complex to be a movement space. And that by all means, neither of them are wrong, neither of them are right. I'm simply pointing them out. The other are these community-based groups that simply form out of necessity and out of the fact that it's survival. And what I'm realizing is that to me, the more manufactured movement spaces tend to attract more angry people because it is a space where it is basically okay to be angry and kind of shout into the void. Again, nothing wrong with that, just not where I'm at personally. And to me, these other more community-based movement spaces are really more focusing on that joy, on that, how do we create, you know, the sense of belonging and self, as opposed to how do we create a moment to fight in. And I'm a part of the nonprofit industrial complex. So when I say that, please know that I totally swallow that hard pill as well with everyone. But that is, I think that before the pandemic, we were already struggling with being as digital as we were, and kind of, to me, feeling like it was fake camaraderie. And after the pandemic, we went full digital, and it just feels fake to me. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel completely authentic. And I am not someone that operates well not being authentic. And so I think that I've had to really just kind of step back from a lot of spaces, support still, be loving, offer good words and prayer, but not necessarily be in the middle of it. Like, I don't need to be the executive director. I don't need to be the march leader. I don't need to speak at every rally, you know, like that is really where I've come to the conclusion of, and just kind of trying to be as supportive as possible while maintaining my peace and building my confidence as much as possible.
Thank you, Tomas. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. One of the things, just one more thing about, you know, like joy. One of the things that happened here in DC was this like really centering of Black joy, you know, and instead of protests, you see, you know, like Black people dancing on the streets. And it's just so magical. It's so beautiful. I'm like, that's amazing. And I'll change gears a little bit because we had a question in the chat earlier, and it comes from a young BIPOC outdoor educator. And they have been trying their best to find ways in which they can center Indigenous voices in their teachings. And they're from the Little Hudson Valley bubble. So just wondering if you had any advice for them, or are there any local Indigenous educators you want to shout out or that they can learn from?
Kind of put me on the spot. I'm sorry. I like am really having a brain freeze right now.
That's okay.
I mean, it's hard because like I want to be like, oh, get on TikTok, and like but it's really hard to know what's real and what's not on TikTok. Like there really is no native authenticity app that can confirm what people are saying. And so it's very easy for people to kind of like exploit these ways and just like offer any old thing to get money online. So there are so many amazing like Indigenous influencers that are great teachers that I literally cannot think of in my head at the moment. But yes, there are not, I'm like one of many amazing Indigenous content creators and storytellers that are out here doing our best to share Indigenous knowledge without exploiting our way and still being respectful to the people you know, who feel very personal connections to these ways, and like walking in it with as much sensitivity as possible. Because like for me, I mean, it's hard because I try to tell people like, you know, I'm not a chief, I'm not a medicine person, I'm not a seeker, I'm not a shaker, like I'm not, and like I don't have this magical title that you probably want from me, but I can pray with you, I can tell you a story, I can be human with you. But like I a lot of us do our best to not overstep those boundaries, and remembering that like these are birthrights. These are not just things like you don't just wake up one day and decide you're a chief. You don't just wake up one day and decide you're a medicine woman. Like these are people that are either born into this or spend the better half of their lives training and preparing and learning and absorbing knowledge to actually take on those positions in communities. So I would definitely be down to send Brenda like a list of influencers and just people that I follow after this, and she can send it out to you.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, you know, like sometimes, you know, like there's like so much information, you know, and I also have, you know, like I spaced out on a lot of information. But also for you guys, if you guys have any questions after this, you know, like feel free to email us. And Tomas, also if you have any more information, we can continue that conversation. But of course, the best way to continue to follow Tomas's work and what they're doing and advice is to follow them on Instagram. And I know Adriana also had a question. So Adriana, tell
Thank
us
you.
what your comment question is.
Thank you, Brenda. And yes, about the conversation, please, making visible is for all of us, and we can fit any resources that you want to share after Tomas, Brenda, and everyone. So this is your space. We will have that there. And I have a comment and it's a question, because that's important for me, because it's not that I am not an activist and I'm not in that, but I'm doing this movement or whatever we can call making visible. And I'm trying to change points of view and having conversations, because I also acknowledge what I was doing bad and what was happening with my attitudes toward peoples and everything. But the thing is, and this is my specific question, how humor has helped you to deal with this? Because I have I have lost humor once I start like learning what I was doing and what was I not seeing. And I also have this problem with humor, because at least in Mexico, the humor has been a tool of people for discrimination and to separate and to oppress women and to oppress people of the community or LGBTQIA plus communities. And they use chistes, or I don't know how to say chistes in whatever, in English. I mean, to say, I don't know how to say chistes, Brenda. Well, to say things about people in humor ways and
it's jokes.
Jokes, sorry. To say jokes and thinking that because it's a joke is permitted. So seeing your social media, guys, you have to go to Tomas' social media, because they use the humor in such a refresh way and also as a tool. So I will like if you can talk more about humor, how to recover humor, how not to be complacent with jokes that can damage people, and using it and recover it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I have always considered myself a funny person. But even when I was in Standing Rock, it was just to sit there and like make people laugh out of things that probably were not that funny, but like, what else you do with it? Just you sit there and cry, you know, like, so I would, I'm a very resilient person. I have really never gone anywhere without some type of ridicule or some type of someone saying something my whole life. And so, I mean, you basically have, the way I looked at it when I was younger is like, you need to beat them or join them. So I just joined them in the laughter, you know, and I took what they would throw at me and I would package it and give it back to them in a way that was like, pointed out what assholes they were being, but was also a way for us both to relate. And like, I've been doing that really since I was very young. Where the anger came in, I don't really know. Still working on that. But like somewhere along the lines, I stopped doing that and started getting much more angry with people. But what I really realized is when actually in 2020, when I was trying to get young people more involved, like to vote, young brown people, trying to get them involved in the voting like stuff is really hard. Brown communities, Black communities are completely disillusioned by the entire democratic process. Like this whole thing of like, save our democracy, like what? We don't care about that shit. Like the democracy that has existed has literally been used to hold us down for generations. Like, and trying to get people out of that and engaged in something that has literally left them out and not cared about them or represented them was really hard. But one way, so when I would go out there and I'd be like, you gotta vote, because if not, your rights are gonna be taken, this is gonna be done, and this is really serious. And oh my God, they were like, bye. They didn't even want to have a conversation with me. It wasn't even a matter of like, oh, what's on the ballot? It was like, I'm going to be real. It was like, you're white, get away from me. You're one of those white Latinos, like just go, you know? And it was it would turn them off because it wasn't the language that they speak. Yes, it was English, but it wasn't what attracts and relates to them. So I found I started looking at all of these other things, like what is trending on Twitter that has to do with getting people out to vote. And what really hit me was I saw this video of these strippers in Atlanta who created this huge video that was like, it wasn't, no one was naked, but it was very pole dancery, very like risque, completely against the grain of what it means the people we want to get to vote. But it was like one of the most popular videos out there, and people were like, I want to go vote. Like they really were engaging in this process that they have never engaged in before. And it was funny. It was a hilarious video. And I realized culture. People respond to culture. People respond to what makes them feel good. What people respond more when they can just kick back and relax than when they've got to get up and engage. And when you kind of give them the idea that they're just sitting back and relaxing and laughing, they listen more, they relate more, they talk to you more, they open up, they ask questions. And that was really when I realized, like, you know what? Maybe I can use the fashion. Maybe I can use the humor. Maybe I can use the queerness, the makeup, the glitter, the glitz, all of those things that I've been told, like, oh, climate activists don't do that. Maybe we do that. And maybe this is what it looks like. And when I started doing that, I realized all of these people that were normally would have never been involved in anything like this. People who had only organized fashion shows and Vogue balls were all of a sudden organizing drag to the polls, drag shows where they were having at polling places for young queer people to feel like they were safe going to vote. All of a sudden you get these people who are just regular everyday people saying, hey, I can throw a party, like, all right, like I can be a part of this. Like, this is me. It reflects who I am. And by doing that, we engage way more people than we would have if we were just have done a go vote live stream or a here, this is why you need to do this. And so that's where that humor really started coming in. And I still very much so struggle not pissing everybody off. I would say I definitely get canceled at least twice a year. But I like to see it as like my time of rest and recuperation. You know what I mean? It keeps me alive.
Thank you. That's great.
I realized actually there are two things as an influencer you should never talk about. All right. J-Lo and Jada Pinkett Smith. All right. They will come for you and they will not stop, man. Like the Puerto Rican community doesn't play with their queen, honey. Like it's pretty funny.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And I really love that, you know, like finding like different methods to communicate with people, because people do respond to different things. I really love that. And I know that Sue's hand has been up for a while. So Sue, what's your comment / question?
Sue bowing in. Thomas, your whole talk has been so wonderful and inspiring and a gift. So I just wanted to thank you. I also was thinking about, because we're talking about the Indigenous community, and a Dharma teacher in our tradition who is Indigenous, she was staying with us for a few weeks in April. We were working, I was thinking, because I've worked a lot with immigrants and other people of color, and know that we white people tend to have our good hearts, but sometimes assume what might be good or bad. And I've learned just to go to the people that I want to help and say, what serves you, or what is the best way to do this? And so I've been struggling with our land acknowledgement, because different people say it differently. And I was trying to figure out what was the most respectful and also honoring and also appropriate. So when Diane was with us one time, I just said, Diane, can you help me look at what we've been doing and see what makes most sense as a person of Indigenous culture that is respectful? And one of the things she said that was really helpful is, which we weren't doing, but I know is used a lot, is we don't want you, and she was speaking for her culture, but she said, we prefer you don't say stolen land, because when you say stolen land, it implies it now belongs to someone else, and that we consider it our land still. And so that is something that I like to share with our community, because it is something that sometimes with good intentions we say, but that she said. And the other thing is really to find a way to express that it is unceded land, but for the people that have lived in the past and also are currently living here, because somewhere around everywhere our people are living there, and to honor that we're still here stewarding the land. So for example, what we came up with was that we acknowledge the Oge-Poge, the original Tewa name for Santa Fe, which means white shell water place. It's located on unceded territorial lands of the Tewa and Tanos people. We honor these original people who have and continue to inhabit, hold sacred, and steward this land. And I just thought, because our community is always working for how we can share and honor from a way that traditional people, and I don't know, Thomas, if you have anything else you would like to add on that, but because it doesn't have the humor in it, which I don't know whether we're.
Thank you, Sue.
Anyway,
thank you, Sue.
that's what I wanted to share.
Okay, thank you, Sue. But maybe we have more questions for someone else. Well, I don't know if you want to add something to what Susan told us, but if not, maybe we can have more questions.
Yeah, I had a question, but I've forgotten it, but I just wanted to share that as well. Sue bowing out.
Yeah, no, I am going to be honest. I don't really do land acknowledgements. Just because I think it's up. I feel like I'm a super easy cop out for people to just do a land acknowledgement and like acknowledge all Indigenous people. And the truth is that that's too easy. And I just feel like folks who are organizing can do a little bit more work to find the people who live on whose land it is and like ask them to come in and acknowledge it in the way that they choose to be acknowledged. So I think, to me, land acknowledgements have less to do with actually acknowledging the land you're standing on and more about authentically including the Indigenous people who you are claiming to respect. that's to me what it's more about than necessarily like actually acknowledging land or what's stolen or not stolen. And I think that like, because I recently did something like this, and like they were asking like me to acknowledge like Northern Californian tribes, and I was like, I don't know anything about these people. Like, no, like respectfully no, but disrespectfully no, you know what I mean? And I made them go back to the people, and they were like, there's no femmes that can do it. And I was like, I have a really hard time believing that there's just like no women in the tribe. Like I just call bullshit. And I think that really challenging these white folks to do that is really that's where the work is being done, because they did find someone and they did bring them in. And actually the person still ended up being like, I can't make it. And I give this person full permission to give the land acknowledgement. And I still said no, because I don't like giving land acknowledgements. But yeah, I think it's really important that you're having those conversations with the people whose land it is.
Get in there quick.
I know, I'm trying to unmute as quick as I can. Thank you, Tomas, for that. We only have 5 minutes left. So I wanted to just like have the opportunity to thank everybody for coming here and for asking your questions. And then Tomas for making the time to talk to us about your experiences, the realizations that you've come to, and just your views on the movement. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that I can bring you onto this space. And for the last 5 minutes, I want to ask you if you wanted to say any last things. And then after that, Adriana and Annie, if you guys had any closing statements, that would be great. And actually, one more thing, I just wanted to give a shout out to my friend Ice, who came all the way from, or who is joining us from Thailand and who joined at 6 a.m. So I really appreciate you, Ice. But yes, go ahead, Tomas, any last statements?
No, just thank you all for listening to me today. I really appreciate spaces like this, so thank you.
This is Annie, and I was wondering, Tomas and Brenda, and I see Sebi's there, if you want to say anything, Sebi, if you want to say anything about how the people who are on this call can best serve Indigenous communities and the work that you're doing, and what are the ways that people can get involved and be supportive. So we really think about this as a space where we get more understanding, but not just so that we make ourselves smarter, but actually so that we do things differently when we leave here. And I already feel totally inspired, like internally and spiritually. So I feel like I got a lot out of this. It's really just been wonderful. Thank you. And I want to inspire us all to maybe do something externally as well. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, any of you all, or even Gaby, who's on the call too. Thanks.
I guess just one quick thing. Always follow, or always try to do your research, try to follow young-led movements and intersectional movements. Because again, there is not one simple solution. One thing can be so intricate, and there is always so many sides to the story that we should hear. And yeah, so try to be as intentional as like being open, just with like this goal and about receiving all of the information, and yeah, being holistic about like the solutions that you decide to approach, because again, there's not one simple answer, I've learned.
Can someone else? No? I just wanted to say something from myself in Making Visible. I think it's important for us white people to do our work. It's not the duty of the people who we have here or the communities that we have to teach us and change our minds. That's something that I have really learned. So I don't want the people who we have here to feel like they have to answer questions. That's not intention at all, Thomas. And we know that. Of course, as a space making visible, we were gonna try to have all the resources there, and we do the work that we can to have you there. And if you have questions, put it there. But the people that we have here, this is a space to have people telling out their stories, their way of living in the communities that we are trying to address. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you everybody for that. And I don't know, Annie, if you have something.
No, thank you. Yes, and I think that's right. And if everybody could share this video once it comes out, and please point people to the resources that are on the page, and come to the next 2 webinars that Brenda is also curating. Yeah, this was amazing. This was absolutely amazing talk, and just the conversation was beautiful and inspiring and moving and transformative. And I think I'm not the only one who feels that way. So thank you so much. So Brenda, any last things before we say goodbye?
No, just thank you, everybody.
Oh, I did have our marketing person texted me to remind people that they're on our Making Visible page. We have something called Spread the Word that also provides images and text. So if you can share to your social media, please go there and share those. And we'll also include that link in the follow-up email. Yes.
Sorry, and if I can add something else, announcements. Also, Brenda, it's in an amazing trip right now, and we can share that also in Mexico. And I don't know if we can share about that. Maybe we can also support that cause as well. So just having that in mind. At the end, we can do some announcement and talk about all that. Thank you.
That's awesome. So shall we finish with a bell, and then we can have announcements and say goodbye? So from this time here that we've spent together, may this learning that we are doing together benefit the world in all kinds of ways, so that we ourselves can be free, and all beings everywhere can have true freedom and true safety and wellness and true ease. And may all beings be free. So thank you all so much for being here. And if you want to donate to help us support this project, you can do that at making-visible.org.
And follow us in our social media, that will help us. And we always have in the social media parts of our sessions. So that's awesome. And I think that can help you also to spread the word, the conversations that we are trying to have here. And of course, Brenda